This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, lob to Mobley, pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul!
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. The NBA season is getting closer and closer. We are just 2 weeks away from Media Day. Training camps right around the corner. And joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, baby. It's getting real.
It's getting real.
You know, we're getting, ever closer, less than a month out from our first preseason action, which is when I'm considering the start of the season, because that's the first time I can really see Cavaliers basketball in any form or fashion. And boy, am I getting desperate and hungry. So, I think that it's getting real. Actual hooping's coming soon. Media Day in, just 2 weeks. Donovan Mitchell's introductory press conference tomorrow on Wednesday. A lot of stuff to be excited about.
A ton of stuff to be excited about. I got excited about the pictures from the Nashville run. I'm dying to see the videos from there.
To say hungry for that content would be doing hunger a disservice as a concept. We are.
I cannot wait. I got a lot more excited even after talking to Tony Jones on our last podcast. Like, I felt like I learned a lot about Donovan Mitchell because, like, I'll be honest, like I don't watch a lot of regular season Jazz. A lot of what I've seen comes in the postseason, and the way that Utah looked in that last postseason looked exactly like he described, like a failing marriage, whatever analogy you want to have. It was ugly.
Tony went heavy on that one. I'll tell you what, pal.
I still don't like the way that he looked at me while he was saying all that, but you know what? We'll let it slide because he was giving us so much good information. But I want to ask, now that time has passed, now that we've talked to some of the experts, now that we've listened to probably about 50 to 100 podcasts on the Donovan Mitchell trade, how are you feeling right now? How has your emotions evolved?
I think I am just pretty much all in at this point. Like it just makes a whole lot of sense in the end. I don't think that they had a legitimate road to anyone else of his caliber via trade or free agency in the immediate future. I think that ultimately this is kind of what you should be grading this on in the end is, do you think they could have packaged their assets to get an equivalent player in any other way? If Jaylen Brown asks out in the next month, I guess maybe you can get bummed out. But, given the fact that the cap room stuff is, was kind of a ticking time bomb there, it was going to be hard to see a road to them being able to add a max quality player and have cap space next year any other time than right now. And I think ultimately they made a move that legitimately vaulted them into East contendership probably by the end of next season with a wildly young team that's all locked up to long-term contracts. I mean, the pick capital is intense, sure. I liked all the players that went out, but it's like sometimes I just think you got to take it. You got to think about it simply. And I sometimes I overthink stuff and try to find too many angles. And the reality is, this dude's super good at basketball. That's really important.
Well, let's be honest, Carter. We are ridiculously niche as a podcast. Like we are a Cleveland Cavaliers focused podcast. We come at things from the fan angle. We get so into the weeds. We're doing this every week throughout the year. Yeah, we're going to look at it under everything under a microscope. We're going to overanalyze it. And you're right. Sometimes it's easier to just kind of take that step back and be like, hey, we added a really, really good player to this team. And I couldn't be more excited for this because it feels like this is going to be an era of Cavs basketball that's going to be really, really memorable. We're going to remember a lot of regular season games. Like we're going to get those kind of special moments like Kyrie against the Spurs or Darius Garland against the Spurs. That has already kind of vaulted into my memory. Like no matter how this ends, whether they reach their potential and win a championship, like this is going to be a stretch that we really, really are going to care about. And we talked about it in 2018 after LeBron left. Like what we really wanted was to see a run of Cavs basketball that we really connect to. And that could be like, whether it's the grit and grind and Grizzlies or some of these other situations, it doesn't necessarily have to result in a championship for it to really, really matter. And I'm excited to kind of get on this journey. But I've got a question for you, Carter, because this is something that has been brought up a couple times, because it's just one of those things where you look at the butterfly effect of different things that have happened in the past and how it would impact the Cavs' approach. Do you think that this trade would have been something that the Cavs did if they made the playoffs last season by winning one of those play-in games versus Brooklyn or Atlanta?
I think it's more likely they make the move. I think that ultimately, this was a bit of a leap of faith. The season didn't end exactly the way you wanted it to. The cautious among us would say maybe it wasn't just injuries. Maybe we were, maybe punching above our weight early. There's been plenty of teams who have done that, right? Like historically, that have come out hot and then lost steam and never quite recaptured that magic. And if in those situations, typically you don't want to go all in on a star guard. So the Cavs kind of, I think, were really, you said it in our original reaction podcast the night of the trade being reported, which was that this was really an investment in and a statement of belief in that young core, that young trio of Garland, Mobley, and Allen. So if they'd made the playoffs and like taken a game or two, I think they're more likely. And in fact, I'll actually go further. I think people would probably be talking about this Cavaliers team differently. I think they would be treated like a real contender in the East and not a second tier team, just because we are a results based basketball
Society.
Watching community after all.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's important to remember, like, there's a lot of people in this organization that were around during all those finals runs. Like, Kobe Altman was a part of that front office. And we saw with probably the greatest heliocentric player ever in LeBron James. Even there, you needed to have other pitches in your arsenal. You needed to have Kyrie Irving that could go out there and create and generate some offense. And I think even though we had success down the stretch, or Darius Garland had individual success kind of running a heliocentric offense, that's not how the season started. And I think there's an understanding that when you get to the postseason, teams are going to take away your fastball. You're going to need to be able to attack teams in different ways. And I think adding someone like Donovan Mitchell that can create from scratch and generate so much of that offense puts them in a position to be better prepared for the playoffs. And I think that's really, really exciting. I think obviously if we're projecting growth in the future, I think we also want Evan Mobley to be part of that, where he can initiate offense and you have another wrinkle in how the Cavs can go and attack teams. So I completely agree with you. I think regardless of how this went, all that would really change in my view is what year of the picks, right? Because the pick would have converted to Indiana. Obviously, Abaji couldn't be part of that deal. So who knows what that compensation would look like, whether it's more draft picks going out, whether they had to give up another good young player because they didn't have Abaji. I don't know how that goes, but I definitely think when the opportunity comes along to add a star, it made sense for the Cavs to make a consolidation trade. We talked about it for years, or I should say a year and a half, that it made sense that at some point a consolidation trade was going to come.
Yeah, it felt like it was something that they needed. They had a lot of mouths to feed before this trade, and they still do. But it certainly is streamlined, and ultimately, like, I think it is just a reminder that rarely do teams get to like pick exactly how they're going to build their powerhouse roster, you know? Like, yes, could the team use a big playmaking wing for when teams throw their taller defenders at this kind of miniature backcourt? Sure. I think there's probably going to be defenses that, slow this offense down and make them solve problems. And some of those problems are going to be harder to solve than others. Welcome to trying to contend at a very, very high level. The Boston Celtics made the finals and could not score by the end against the Golden State Warriors. So like
I said, I think that's the best a team can possibly be without a single person that can dribble.
Yes, 100%. So every team has legitimate flaws. I mean, talk about a team without a big playmaking wing. The Warriors just won a title with Andrew Wiggins as their second best player. So, you're going to have to.
What are you implying about Andrew Wiggins, good sir?
I'm implying that is not what we would have expected 2 years ago. I think, I'd love to see Wiggins in a Cavs uniform someday. I think he's a really, really good player. But you know what I'm saying here. Point is, the Cavs are going to have flaws with this new lineup, and what we're going to learn is whether they're fatal flaws and to what extent are they fatal flaws. I think sometimes as a basketball watching community, we get too much into this. Oh, well, it didn't work in the finals. In fact, I was just on Bobby Manning's podcast, and Bobby's obviously covers the Celtics, and was talking about the team like they weren't any good, and I'm like, Bob, what are you doing? Yeah,
I was on his pod in the middle of the year, and he was talking about how much better the Cavs are than the Celtics. I mean, fandom is a roller coaster, my friend.
But point is, I think especially I think everyone's done this with this Celtics team. Where it's like, you guys don't understand how freaking good this season was for them. I feel like because it ended a little ugly on the offensive end, Tatum didn't look good. It's like, oh, well, they need X, Y, and Z. It's like, they don't need much. They were pretty darn close. So, it is a degree of how fatal is the flaw of this Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse miniature backcourt,
I don't know. Have you seen my height watch tweets lately, Carter?
I'll tell you what, you are in fine form, my friend. so I think that yes, and this might slow them down a little bit, but I don't think so much so that you shouldn't have made the trade. In the end, yes, they're small. Yes, I do think they should be able to compensate for it, at least against 95% of teams in the league. And I think they are going to be electric to watch next year and for years to come. So I'm all the way in, my friend.
You think you're all the way in? When I'm looking at how my feelings have evolved, I mean, listening to so many smart people be so in on the trade, and it made me reflect on some of the conversations we had leading up to it. And the one with S really jumps out, where I'm like, Toronto makes so much sense for Donovan Mitchell, even though I'm not the highest on him. They had the infrastructure in place, and just thinking back on that, being okay, why would I say that about Toronto and not the Cavs? I have now, after listening to everybody really be in on this trade, it made me reevaluate things, and I've got new tiers to unveil for you, Carter.
Oh, Justin. Yeah,
Tier one?
And I'd like to let folks know on our rundown for this, Justin just wrote new tiers and did not explain it one bit before we started.
Because I just want your reaction to my tiers. I don't even care about your opinion. I've seen you being tepid on Twitter, and I want you to talk with your chest a little more, Carter, going into this season. But tier one, Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, the end. I'm cutting it off there. I think those teams are the cream of the crop. Tier two, Philadelphia 76ers, Cleveland Cavaliers, Miami Heat, cut off. And after that, we will have the teams that I previously had in tier two. I moved them down to a third tier: Atlanta Hawks, Toronto Raptors, Chicago Bulls. And
no Brooklyn Nets. Are you going to cop out?
Brooklyn Nets are in there too. I keep forgetting about them. I'm okay with the policy of just acting like they don't exist until we see what they actually are. But yeah, let's put the Brooklyn Nets there. They can be right there. They can be right there with Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't know what their over under is this year, but I think everyone should be paying attention to the over. Because my goodness, everyone, come on. This is ridiculous.
It's a backlash to all the stories all summer.
It's too much backlash. I think people are overcorrecting.
It's very possible that people are overcorrecting, but at the same time, they got a lot of major pieces that didn't play basketball last season, and two major pieces that miss a lot of time.
I get it.
For specifically the regular season, which is what these tiers are, I had the Cavs up there. I have them as a home court team, and I think that that is a reasonable goal. I think this team should absolutely be gunning for it. I think they should be motivated to go out there, and right now, why not? Why is this team not better than the Miami Heat?
They haven't done it yet. That's really it. I mean, if you go roster spot for roster spot, at least in the top 7, I think this team should feel really good about its top 7 right now. I think 8 through 10 in the rotation, the questions start coming, especially with Ricky hurt.
Can I just expand that to 8? Because I feel really good about Howell Neto. I feel really good about him as a backup point guard.
That's nice, but like I'm talking guys that are going to play more than 15 minutes. You know, like, and you know, not that many players past 8 play more than 15. So maybe I'm hyper indexing, but I think definitely 1 through 7, they can stack up with just about any team in the league. Mm-hmm. You know, the ceiling. You can't just go player for player because obviously, like, Giannis is, you know, something different than anything the Cavs have right now.
Yeah, that's a trump card.
So, like, even if you know 2 through 7 are better than Milwaukee's 2 through 7, Milwaukee's probably still better. You know, I'm just picking a team with a super duper star as an example. But you know, I think that just stacking up the rosters, Miami, especially as they get older, it's hard to make the case for why they're better other than experience, coaching, infrastructure, etc. But like, I don't want to write that off either. I don't know. Like, I think that what I said immediately after the trade was that I feel like anyone between Philly, and Miami, I think those are 2 teams that are like really primed to, like, I might have them up in that first tier or at the top of the second tier, but I think they are the best candidates to drop out down a tier or even 2 tiers this year.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, I still have Miami in the same tier. I have tons of confidence in them in the postseason. What actually inspired this was a tweet that you had responding to friend of the pod, Iman, who does great work for Basketball News, who she was talking about, hey, I don't really understand why the consensus seems to be that the Cavs have surpassed the Raptors and will be better next season. And you still had them in the same tier as the Raptors, which, to be fair, I think I did at the same time.
It's not that outrageous. You acted like I committed a war crime.
You did, because here's reality, Carter. The Cavs were the better team last season, and they added Donovan Mitchell. They are a tier ahead. Let's puff out our chests a little bit. Let's get cocky again, because you know what? We did this whole tepid rise thing. We were slow playing this, you know, understanding that it's a process. We added Donovan Mitchell, and we have a really good team. Let's start talking a little bit with our chest, Carter.
That's fine. I did say I think they're better than the Raptors, and I'm still pretty sure of that.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah, this public forum is as good of a place as any.
When was the last time you barked?
Oh, I'm not a woofer, Justin. That's not really my brand.
I think you need to bark a little more. I think you need to get confident. I think you need to get excited for this season.
Listen, after that, I'm actually interested.
I would ask you to bark right now, but I think the mic would pop.
I think first off, it wouldn't, because I have an excellent mic with a great condenser and compressor. So no, it would not pop because I invest in this podcast, Justin. But you know, maybe after the first Cavalanche, we can open the pod with a little bit of woofing.
Okay. Well, especially with opening night being against Toronto, we might get a chance to get a little arrogant right off the bat. It's funny, like, even post Mitchell, I still love that matchup stylistically. I love it even more, frankly. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun.
You know, because the Cavs have this, you know, crazy size differential in their backcourt and front court, and Toronto, everyone's 6'8". Plus Fred VanVleet. And I still think those styles are gonna like be the future of this conference. You know, those two styles just clashing up against each other, especially as Masai keeps absolutely kicking butt building that team. So I
I love the core that's there, but I don't love a lot of what they've done to improve. Like, I don't think their depth is great. Like, if we're comparing last year's Cavs and last year's Raptors, I think when you look at trade deadline acquisitions, I feel better about Karis LeVert taking a step forward and contributing next season than I do with the Toronto swapping out the pick that became Malachi Branham for Thad Young. Like, I don't think Thad Young's going to play a big part of it. They still don't have a backup guard that I feel confident about. Like, they're kind of banking on Malachi Flynn or
Delano way back boy Banton.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite deep cut references that no one gets, good. But he looks just like one of those guys.
He does. I do think the Otto Porter Jr. signing is good, but I just think that they're a really, really shallow team, more shallow than the Cavs even. And
I would agree with that. I think they are still a team where one injury at, whether it's Van Vliet or Siakam, like, meaningfully affects their ability to be as good as they want to be this year. Whereas I think one of the sneaky benefits of the Mitchell addition is if Garland gets hurt again, I don't think the offense is going to tank. And, the Cavs
and that's part of why I feel more confident about this team going into the regular season is it's just not as top heavy. Like, I think there's real potential for this trade with the Jazz to kind of be a little bit like the AD trade, where New Orleans feels really good about the pieces they got back. I think Utah's really going to like the players they got back. But the Cavs feel good about it the same way that the Lakers felt good about it because they won a championship. The difference is you're not top heavy with two players. You have at least four you feel great about and a really good supporting cast around them. So I feel more confident about this Cavs team than I did even a week ago. Maybe it's playing a little bit too much 2K with these guys. I'm always guilty of that. But the other thing I want to talk about before we get into some of the questions that were submitted on Discord, I wanted to do a little bit of a Discord specific mailbag to give a shout out to all the people that join us there. Of course, for anyone that wants to join the Discord, just send a screenshot of your pod review to chasedownpod@gmail.com.
Our boy X Factor 2005 in the chat did it mid pod.
How about that?
So shouts out to X Factor. We'll see you in the Discord here soon, my friend.
I love that. But I've seen a lot of conversation about Dean Wade recently and kind of him being dismissed as even an option to start at small forward. And he was really, really good last season. And I think we are guilty of this. So I'm going to, rather than point the finger at anybody else, I'm going to point it right at myself. I think we have been a little too stuck on considering like Dean Wade a cute story, where at this point I think we have enough of a sample size where we can just talk about him as a regular rotation player and a good rotation player at that, because he has played a lot of minutes in a lot of different lineups. And like even last season, when you look at like the Brooklyn game, he guarded Kevin Durant really well. He bothered Kevin Durant, and those lineups with Dean Wade at the three worked exceptionally well. And I think when you're looking, I don't necessarily think he's going to start, but if he needs to fill in as a starter, I feel good about it. And I think he should be a pretty regular piece in the rotation. And I'm curious to see, and our buddies at Locked On Cavs have talked about this, and Vitor's mentioned it as well. Like in the exit interviews, the instructions Wade and Stevens got were, hey, convert your game to small forward. Let's get you guys playing more on the perimeter. Let's see if you can step into that role. And given how effective Dean Wade has been throughout his tenure with the Cavs, I feel really good about his chances of being a meaningful rotation piece because he's done it in the past.
Yeah, I think Wade is really interesting. First off, shouts to the It's Cavalier podcast YouTube channel for that Dean Wade supercut if you're watching on YouTube. I think Wade is an interesting guy because at this point he has been a bit of a cute story, a bit of a great, a really nice fill-in kind of piece. And I think even now it's hard to imagine him as like a starter, as the first choice at starter. Yeah. It is still a league where pedigree matters, and Okoro was the 5th overall pick. I still think Isaac is going to get every opportunity to win that starting job. Mm-hmm. I do think that if he does not take that opportunity, Dean is right there, and it is not a laughable choice. I think that when we saw Dean starting at the 3 last year, we did see the offense start to get squeezed a little too much, but you got to remember that's playing next to Isaac Okoro at the 2. The offense should look much more dynamic with a Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell backcourt, flanking him and letting him still be more of a glue guy offensively. I love his ability to play perimeter defense, not just as a switch guy, but as just a straight up man-to-man defender. I think he moves his feet really well. I think his feel defensively is really good. Like I often note that I feel like he is on balance. His footwork's really good. I think his positioning is often very good. He allows the Cavs to retain a little bit of that big ball identity playing at the 3. And frankly, I think he should be the backup 3 this season.
You know what, that was more of what I was getting at. I think I give him a nod over just about anybody for cracking this rotation that maybe isn't in everyone's consensus top 8 or 9. I don't think we should fully dismiss Jetty, only because Jetty looks so much better last season when he was playing with a ball handler, and the Cavs are going to have a lot of guys to set him up, whether it's Garland, Mitchell, LeVert, Neto. Like there's going to be guys that are going to make things easy for Jetty. So I don't think we should fully write him off, but at the same time, just knowing the way that JB likes to prioritize defense and make sure that people are being accountable on that end, and the fact that you maybe don't need the same kind of offensive juice that Jetty gave you when you have Mitchell out there, I do think that Dean Wade becomes a much more viable candidate for that. And lineup data can be a little messy because I agree with you. There were times where it looked like the offense was getting gummed up with Dean Wade at the 3, with Okoro out there. But it's worth noting that at least in the 108 minutes that they had a 121 offensive rating and a plus 22.4 net rating.
Yeah, you look through all the lineup data and all the 5-man lineups that, had a decent amount of volume that Dean Wade was in, were pretty successful. I think there's something to being big and being able to move your feet really well. And I think that he is just very, very, he just kind of fits in, he's not going to be a splash player. And I actually wanted to ask you, Mr. Z in the YouTube chat said, let's not forget Lamar, especially if he finally hits that 3 at a 36% clip. I think Lamar and Dean are, have so many ties that bind them as players because they both were undrafted players, both came in, I think they were the same year, right?
Yep.
Yes, both came in the same year, both earned a spot in the rotation at various times, and clearly are locker room favorites for the, their lunch pail attitude. Why Dean and not Lamar? Ugh, Jesus, I just died.
Oh my God.
Why Dean
that was gross.
I'm sorry. Why Dean and not Lamar?
Well, I think at this point Dean has been the better player.
I agree.
I think
Lamar is more of an event player, but
yes.
I think Dean has been more consistent.
Yeah, and the 3-point shot has been better. We've talked about this with Okoro, right? Like, I think going from a 35% 3-point shooter at 2 attempts per game to 4 attempts is easier to do than Lamar going from very, very low volume at 3 to at 26% to all of a sudden being someone that can take 4 threes a game at 36%, right? And you know what? Like you said, pedigree kind of matters. Like when it was draft night and it came out that the Cavs added Dean Wade, remember we had Trevor Magnotti on here that said if he wasn't hurt, he probably would have been a first-round talent, like a late first-round player. So I just think Dean being the better player to this point, he's bigger as well at 6'9". He's shown the mobility on defense. I don't think we should write off Lamar, and I could certainly see it. Like if I've seen the offseason hype videos for Lamar too, and again, we just need 1 or 2 of these guys to hit and step up in this way. But for now, going off the information we have, without seeing these guys in preseason and the growth that they've had, right now I give Dean that nod, but I think it's not outlandish to say, hey, maybe Lamar can step up and earn that role either. Like,
well, I'll tell you what Lamar's role will always be, as long as he's a member of the roster, is guy JB puts in when he's mad at the starters.
Well, he's going to play hard at all times, so that's yes. Great. And like I think Lamar's shown some juice as well, but specifically when you're talking about like filling in with the starters, like I think you want to have someone that's a little more low usage, that doesn't need to put the ball on the floor. About 2/3 of Dean's shot attempts come from behind the 3-point line. It's a different profile, and one that matches well with the existing talent they have. So
yeah,
it's a good question.
And to your point, by the way, I think even if Jetty is the starting backup 3 to start the year and is getting a lot of those minutes, and by the way, Wade might get minutes at the 4 even if he's not the backup 3, because obviously Mobley spends so much time playing backup 5 that you kind of have to end up splitting even some Love minutes especially if Love is having a rough game, not moving as well, or whatever it might be. Even
if you want to keep Love at 18 to 20 minutes, that leaves 12 minutes unspoken for if Allen and Mobley are playing about 32 each, right?
Correct. So I think that ultimately we'll see him play there. But what I do think is that even if Jetty earns the backup 3 job and starts the season in that spot in the rotation, if Isaac were to get hurt or miss a game here or there, I think Dean should be the next starter in line. I do not think Jetty fits as well with the starting group.
I think so too, and I think that also jives with JB's philosophy, or at least what we can kind of assume has been his philosophy, which is let's try to keep continuity in the rotation, right? Like the backup doesn't always fill in, and we saw that with Dean coming in and being the starter even when Larry was out, even if he wasn't in the rotation the night before, because he wanted to keep the backups together to keep that chemistry going. Let's move on to our Discord questions. And friend of the podcast, Jeff Domina asked, how does adding Donovan Mitchell change what we expect from Mobley?
Quick aside, Justin. What do you think about Don? I've been seeing a lot of Dons from people. I think I'm going to be a Donnie guy. I think that'll be my affectionate nickname for him. Donnie!
I'm going to let it happen naturally over the course of a game. I don't hate that, though. Anyways, nice way to derail me. That almost derailed me as much as you throwing up all over yourself. How does adding Mitchell change what we expect from Mobley? I think there was an expectation that he'd have the ball in his hands more and start to create offense. Is that still the expectation, or do we think he'll be used more as a connector than a creator? Your thoughts?
I think that it's probably not quite so binary. I think I don't know if that was my expectation as much. I think he is such a glue type player, and I don't think him having the ball in his hands and initiating offense makes it harder for Donovan or Darius to cook. I think they were going to continue to operate out of the high post with him in a similar way that we kind of saw early in the season with Garland and Sexton. Where, using him as a playmaker. Do I think his shots per game is going to go up? Probably not, just because Donovan's going to eat so many extra possessions. But, I think it was, I think it was Tony on our pod last week that said, JB's going to have to find a way to get this team 8-9 more possessions a game. And I think that's one way you're going to be able to mitigate that. I just think he is a hub still for this team, and they can still continue to develop that, and I think he'll make the right decision. If the right decision is to spray it out to Donovan, cutting down the lane, or Darius coming off a pin down, then he'll do that. If the right move is to try to get a bucket, he'll do that. So I don't think that this limits his ceiling as an offensive creator. It might limit his points per game a little bit, but I'm not super concerned about that. I don't think it meaningfully affects the steps I'm hoping his offense takes this year.
I'd be a little surprised if he was even overly concerned about that as well. That doesn't seem to be kind of his makeup. And I agree with you. Like, I think he's still going to be an outlet in a lot of ways. Like, if teams are going to sell out at trying to trap and attack those guys, like Mobley is going to be the outlet, right? He's going to be that high post guy that you throw it into and get him to initiate some offense. And realistically, like, I think you and I both expect the Cavs to stagger, where Garland and Mitchell split time, Mobley and Allen split time. And if Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell are out there as the primary and secondary initiators for the second unit, Mobley's going to be able to show off a lot of his growth. And maybe what we'll see is kind of a situation where it's going to be matchup dependent, right? Like it's how the Cavs attack teams may be dictated by how teams are defending them. And I think that's the real advantage of having a Garland, Mitchell, and Mobley, especially when you are projecting forward to see what they look like if they reach their potential and hit their ceilings and their primes. Having those three guys that can all initiate in different ways and attack defenses is going to make you a really versatile team. And there was a really smart comment in our Discord the other day that I've kind of been chewing on for a while. And it came from a user with the handle Jokic Skeptic and Real Hooper. So you know that he knows ball. But he was talking about how after this Mitchell trade, what we're asking of Mobley is going to be more Boston Kevin Garnett than Minnesota Kevin Garnett. And obviously, Kevin Garnett in Boston would look different if he wasn't older and he was still kind of young and in his prime and all that. But I think it's a really smart observation because there are going to be times where Mobley takes over and we're going to see him develop. But I think not asking him to take on such a high usage and to really kind of be a secondary guy is going to allow him to continue to do the little things and everything that makes him special, rather than maybe going down like an Anthony Davis path where I think back to Anthony Davis in the NCAA championship, and he won a game single-handedly with his defense. And that kind of impact that he had kind of shifted when he took on such a load offensively. Even Tony pointing out how Donovan came in as a really good defender, played good defense his rookie year, and as more offensive responsibility came on to him, the defense fell off. When you have this many options and guys that can absorb usage, it's going to allow Mitchell to play better defense. It's going to allow Mobley to play better defense. It's going to allow Garland to play better defense. And they can take over in spurts rather than doing the constant heliocentric, I'm generating absolutely everything type offense that's going to sap other things out of your game and make you more predictable as a team.
I think I'm gonna I don't know if I agree with the KG framing, and I never have because I keep going back to Duncan. I see 2007 Duncan as a really good comp here. Okay. A guy who could get to the point where, and I think this isn't a next year thing. This is a next couple years thing as he kind of continues to grow into that eventual top 5 player we think he can be, where he can take over a game offensively. But he can also just as easily facilitate for a star backcourt, except in this instance, it's Darius and Donovan, who I think, have a lot more explosive scoring firepower than, Tony Parker and Manu ever had. Obviously, it was 100%. Always, and also just a different era. But I think that is the role I see for him. I remember feeling like Duncan absolutely killed the Cavs in some of those finals games. But it wasn't by dropping 45 or 50 points. So to that end, I think that's the role I continue to see for him. And the role I think is best for him. Even if this year, let's say they didn't make the Mitchell trade and Mobley really had to stretch his legs a little bit as an offensive creator, had to try to go be that volume scorer. And even if he did pretty well at it, I still think in the end, I'd rather him have that kind of 2007 Duncan role, that Boston KG role on offense, because I think that's where his skill set is most impactful, and where he can make the largest overall impact on the game. So I do think that's kind of the direction he's going, and I think that's for the best for him. Yeah, this is not a concession in my mind for him to play this style.
I don't think so either. And I think we're actually saying the same things. I don't take the Boston KG thing as literally, because I think if you had MVP Kevin Garnett on a roster with that kind of talent around him, it would look different, right? And there would be times where he could take over, but it's more the need to versus can to thing. And I agree with you. I think he's going to go out there. I think Evan Mobley absolutely can average over 20 points per game. I just think this is just such a good role role. And the fact that both Garland and Mitchell can play off ball really allows you to continue to get Mobley these reps. And I think we are absolutely going to see him used as a creator because, I mean, let's face it, we've talked about it a bunch of times, like the Cavs path to being a contender and winning a championship with this core is going to be Mobley reaching his potential. So I absolutely expect that to still be prioritized. And
it's also worth noting, by the way, this extra attention Donovan Mitchell's going to receive also should benefit Evan Mobley. Like we saw that every time he did get a deep seal and could get to the spot first and didn't have to try to muscle his way there, he was typically able to generate a really, really good look. And I think that, he is going to really benefit from, little duck ends where the defense is panicked about something else. And so, like, even though he might have, I'm just going to make up a number, like 4 or 5% lower usage or 4 or 5% lower time on ball, I think his scoring opportunities might be made up for by the attention that, the other players on the court are getting.
Yeah, I actually don't expect his usage to go down. Like I think
I don't really either.
I think he's probably going to get more field goal attempts per game. Like, if anything, maybe we'll see Jarrett Allen leaned on a little less, right? Where he doesn't necessarily need to contribute as many points. But I think this team's going to play more up tempo. Like Tony said, generate more possessions, more opportunities, more touches. But especially when you look at the way that they can stagger throughout a lineup, like I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunities. And if the Mobley growth looks as real as it looks in all these offseason hype videos, I mean, it's going to be hard to justify not giving him those touches, right? And you want to continue to nurture those aspects of the game because when you talk about a big forward that can initiate the offense, we might already have it in house with Evan Mobley. The next question I want to get to from the Discord comes from our buddy, cousin Drew, who asks, why did the Cavs make this move versus the DeJounte one?
I think they made this move because Donovan Mitchell's better than DeJounte Murray. I think they made this. Would you have
preferred the DeJounte? Let's start there.
I think I would have before the trade. I think I said this in the immediate aftermath of the trade, but I think I would have preferred DeJounte hypothetically, and now that it's happened, I prefer Donovan Mitchell. I think the angstiness about Murray's ability as a jump shooter feels like a harder thing to bridge.
Sorry to cut you off, but did you happen to hear Kevin Pelton on Low Post say that DeJounte's a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter than Garland or Mitchell?
Okay, I'm just not even going to touch that.
That's the correct response.
I think that the concerns about the jumper are there. I think the concerns about him being able to lead an elite offense on his own are there. And I'm a little, how I feel about this, like high volume guards with good defensive reputations sometimes start to become more reputation than impact, and point of attack defense is just like not that big of a deal. I'd almost rather, I'd rather the team just ask Donovan to be a more focused, impactful defender when it counts. I think that seems more bridgeable. And I think we've been
pretty consistent with that over the years when it comes to guard defense, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like there is no history of Mitchell being a good defensive player. And even if he's just break even and a good kind of on-ball defender, like you look at the B-ball index stats and he was good on ball last season. Like he was fine. Like if carrying a little bit less of a load offensively means that he takes a step forward on that end, that's fine. Like I think we would all agree that just if you're talking about not even like trade value and all that, like just as a basketball player, you'd pick Donovan Mitchell on this team. And I think that's where I've come down on this, where, yeah, you can talk about relative values and all that, but Atlanta gave up very similar pick compensation. And I mean, you look at kind of weighing those two options out, like getting the talent, the all-star, the perfect fit here, someone that can solve a lot of the spacing issues that you have, and just the fact that you have more team control with them as well. Like there's a lot that's more attractive on this side and this option than compared to DeJounte Murray. Because like a lot of times when we were talking about DeJounte hypotheticals, I didn't think it would come close to that kind of trade package to add him. And when you start to get into that level of unprotected picks, yeah, I would take the better player.
Yeah,
I think it's that simple.
I think ultimately when you're going big game hunting, sometimes just get the biggest game.
Yep, totally agree. His follow-up question was, if this trade happens on day one of the offseason, do you think the subsequent moves would be any different? So
that's an interesting question.
The free agent signings.
That's an interesting question. I think the Rubio thing just seems so predestined. Like no matter what, like they certainly aren't mad they have Rubio, who Donovan loves, on the team now. And following that logic, I think they certainly would have still signed Howell Neto for what they reported to sign him for, because you need someone to play point guard until Rubio's back. And
another guy that Mitchell loves.
Yep, and they still needed a backup five, especially in the aftermath of losing a player who can spend a decent amount of time at the four in Lauri Markkanen. I don't know if they would have made any different changes. Maybe they would have been able to scoop up one of these wings that kind of was, just hanging around. Maybe with that extra roster spot, maybe they're making a real push at TJ Warren or something like that to see if they can pick up some extra wing depth at the three. But I don't think meaningfully different. I don't think that they would have changed the way they invested the money they invested, I guess, would be my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I think the only change that I could maybe see is like maybe being active on the trade market to add a backup wing if you don't add someone like a TJ Warren or another option for that 15th roster spot, like maybe using some of the non-guaranteed contracts or expiring contracts. But at the end of the day, like I don't think there's a real benefit to doing a move like that, because especially when you look at like a Karis LeVert or Isaac Okoro, like I think their internal improvement and looking to see how they look like, what they look like in this context, is probably the best value play right now. Like sometimes you have to be a little bit patient with this, and I think there's realistic reasons to be optimistic about what both of those guys can contribute next season within the context of this team. So I don't think it drastically changes things. I definitely think the free agent signings still make a lot of sense with Mitchell there, because I mean, honestly, like these signings made sense with Sexton in the rotation, right? So Mitchell just does a better version of that. So these signings continue to make sense to me, and I'm excited to see Neto in the rotation. I like that we have Robin Lopez that we can lean on in certain matchups.
Yeah, I like the roster that they have, I guess, is the TLDR here. And it is an interesting question, though. I had to think about it. So shout out to our favorite grump, Drew, in the Discord.
He certainly is that. Love talking to him. Soul Slayer asks, do we think the Cavs should stagger Garland and Mitchell, and what lineups would you like to see with each of them? So I'll actually take this one first, Carter, give you a moment to think about it. I don't know if you've prepared that. Obviously, we think that I think we both think that they will stagger them. I like the idea that if you're projecting for 32 minutes each for Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen, they can play 16 together and 16 apart, and that means one of them is on the court at all times. Some of the lineups that I'd like to see, Neto, Mitchell, Jetty, Love, and Mobley would be a lot of fun. And for the Garland side of things, I think Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Love, and Allen would be a lot of fun. Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Love, and Allen, how many minutes would you guess they got last season, Carter?
Probably less than like 20.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Yeah, they got 3 minutes together. Plus 37 net rating. How about that? Which is absolutely nothing but noise. But I would like to see those lineups. And obviously Love is kind of acting as the bridge between those two lineups in that situation. You could just as easily put Dean Wade in there, or, honestly, even Lamar Stevens would probably work in that Neto, Mitchell, Jetty, Mobley lineup. So there's a lot of different ways you could go, but those are two that I think would be interesting to check out.
I think there will be an impulse from certain fans and certain people who are following the team to say, you don't need to stagger them, because you have a legit, engine for your offense in Ricky Rubio once he's back healthy, obviously. to kind of keep things going. But like, I don't know if I agree with that line of thinking. I think you pretty much have to. You don't have to, but you should stagger them as much as possible. Just because what's so nice is normally when you have a pairing like this, you kind of that work well together offensively is you worry about what you lose when you split them apart. That's the downside to staggering normally is okay, these guys work so well off each other. Now Donovan's kind of getting all the defense attention on him. Maybe it's best for us just to kick the crap out of teams in the minutes they play together and try to survive without them. But I think, with a guy like Ricky or a guy like Neto, with great supplementary playmakers at the 4 and either Evan or Kevin, I think that you can really succeed with either of these guys as that heliocentric option in those minutes. The offense should not collapse this season. Pretty much no matter what the personnel is. I do like that you threw out Jetty as a person to play alongside Donovan. I think Donovan more than Darius, just because Darius is such a playmaking savant, whereas Donovan is much more of a functional playmaker, as Tony talked about on the pod last week. That I think you want someone with a little bit of high variance as a shooter on the wing with him. Like, I don't think that lineups, like, for example, a lineup I'm not super interested in is like a hyper defense lineup with like Donovan, Okoro, Wade, Mobley, Allen. Like, I think the spacing will feel constricted there. I think you want to give Mitchell running mates on offense that generate really easy reads for him. You can make that one, that pass that's right in front of him, as opposed to trying to like manipulate chess pieces around the board. Just let him go be a bucket getter. So I don't know if I have any specific lineups that are really jumping out at me right now, but I do think you do want to stagger them because they can be just as helpful apart as they are together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as great as Ricky Rubio was, like, it's not like he's a one-man offense, right? Like, we talked about how his impact was great, but he's not the most efficient player. And I think coming off that injury, it would be unfair to expect him to kind of be a one-man offense. Because even if you look at it last year, like, he played 460 minutes without Garland on the court, and they had a 101 offensive rating in that time. Like, it was barely a net positive. With Garland, it was 113, and that was one of their best lineups, right?
Yeah, and by the way, barely a net positive is really good for a backup point guard without the star player.
It's terrific, yeah, especially when you look at the absence of other options. Like, I would expect that to be better if Colin Sexton didn't get hurt, right? And you had that option. I have a question for you, Carter. Would you rather have Ricky play with Garland or Mitchell?
I was actually going to... great minds, Justin, because I was about to ask you if you'd rather have Karras play with Garland or Mitchell. So I'll answer yours first, then you answer mine. I'd rather have Ricky with Donovan, because I do love that orchestrator, like that running a team kind of vibe out of Ricky. I think that's the kind of stuff he does so well. He's he can still play off ball and let Donovan cook. His his catch and shoot 3 is good enough, in my opinion, for him to be able to kind of play in that role and be helpful and not be someone who needs to take the ball out of Donovan's hands. So I think he is the right pairing for him. Do you think Karras is the right pairing for Darius?
Yes, compared to Mitchell, I like Garland and Karras together. I still believe that can work. I think especially with Jarrett Allen, and I guess that's reflected in kind of these lineups, right? Like Garland, LeVert with Okoro, Love, and Allen. Like, you have the spacing and Love. We'll see what Isaac Okoro can bring to the table, but I think those two are really dynamic, and they're great pick and roll ball handlers. And pairing them with someone like Jarrett Allen makes a lot of sense. And hopefully Karis LeVert can expand his catch and shoot game. Like, I love that every time I see a video of Evan Mobley in a run or Darius Garland in a run, it seems like Karras is always out there with them. And I think that's really important. That's the kind of stuff that can pay dividends, especially compared to the absence of time they had. So,
and always with those big ass diamond stud earrings. I don't know why I always notice them. I'm not like a jewelry guy, but Karras is rocking those earrings every time he's playing.
He absolutely is. So yeah, that's probably the way that I would stagger it. And I like playing Donovan with Neto or Rubio. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I like the kind of two-headed snake of Garland out there with LeVert. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities. Vinman asks, truthfully, and I put truthfully in here because he wants us to be honest. Who is the starting small forward for the Cavs in January?
I think it's still Okoro until proven otherwise. I think the play-in stuff is, and just the general angst around his offensive game is underselling the kind of season that Okoro had, the kind of development he's shown so far. Even if the three-pointer isn't one iota better than last year, I still think he's probably my choice to start. Because of his, elite on-ball defense, I think he's going to feast as a cutter. With all the extra attention on the other players. I think he is the best suited to go chase around high octane guards and wings. Like if you're a Dean Wade proponent, that's great. But then, the Trae Youngs of the world, these water bug point guards that are more quick than powerful, that's not really Dean Wade territory. Whereas Isaac has a little bit more pliability in the fact that he can go chase around a Trae Young and then go bang with Jason Tatum. He might not be perfect for the latter, but he is more capable of doing that than the inverse for Dean Wade. So, I just think he makes sense there in the end, and he would both be my choice for the job and my expectation for the job.
He's my guess and by expectation as well. The thing that's been pretty consistent with Isaac Okoro is even though his individual performances on the offensive end of the floor haven't always been great and lackluster, I think, compared to some people's expectations, the lineups always seem to work with him. And I think that's going to continue to be true with more talent around him. I've talked about how he's in a lot of ways kind of the small forward Tristan Thompson, where it just works with more talent around him. But I think when we're looking when we're projecting these leaps out of Lamar Stevens, who's 4 years older than him, or Dean Wade, I think we should be doing the same thing for Okoro. The growth he showed last season was meaningful, and I expect him to continue to get better. I think just the fact that it works so well with him there in the past is going to continue in the future, the same way that I think Dean Wade completes a lot of lineups and works well. So I'm going to guess that it's Isaac Okoro. I think he's going to earn the job. I think he's going to keep the job. And I think a lot of kind of the issues that he's had guarding larger wings in his rookie season at 19 years old, that's not a length thing to me. He's still 6'5", 6'6", with a long wingspan, and he's strong. He needs to learn how to be a physical defender and throw guys off a rhythm and do kind of the little things that take time. But the fact that he's such a good perimeter defender already at that age is not something that should be swept under the rug. And I'm optimistic that he can build off of the offensive growth he showed last season as well.
Yeah, I think he's still an exciting player, still an interesting player. And again, it just kind of makes the most sense, right? I think there's a reason everyone's slotting him in at the 3. One lineup, by the way, I did think of a Darius lineup I'm pretty excited about, which is Darius, Karras, Okoro, Mobley, Allen. It's one of the most conventional lineups the Cavs are going to trot out, but I really like the idea of playing with two, like-sized wings that can switch a lot of perimeter action, and still kind of switch even with the bigs and hold their own. I think that'll be an interesting lineup, and one I think we'll see.
Yeah, I would strongly guess that we would see that. It only got 22 minutes together last season. I just quickly looked that up.
You are moving.
I'm speedy, man. I'm always prepared. I'm always ready to go. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting combinations, but I assume that it's going to be Okoro. I think he's probably the safest bet to earn that spot and keep it. Mason asks, last question, Carter. Mason asks if we can see Kevin or Karras being moved this season with both of them being expiring contracts. This is something that I've seen speculated from national media because obviously expiring deals have value beyond who they are as players, and they're both pretty valuable players too. Do you see a move with either of those guys?
I don't know if I support that trade, Justin, but you know what I do? What I always do support is Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Zoom. You almost forgot. I didn't. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Justin.
This is why you're a good teammate and a good co-host.
I couldn't help it.
We were in a good groove. I feel abused having not done the read, but you know what? You stepped up.
I haven't taken a read from you in a really long time, and it felt good.
It should feel good. You did good work there.
Did you feel swerved?
I saw where you were going, and I was like, my God, I did forget that, because I think we were just in too good of a
we were today. Cooking. We were cooking. To actually answer Mason's question, though, I still think it's more unlikely than likely. I think that Karas's value at his number is like a little nebulous. I think it's a bit of a prove it season for Karas, and I think the whole league's going to be watching. Mm-hmm. And the thing that makes it more complicated is that if he's doing well enough that this prove it season is kind of proving in Karas's favor, I don't think the Cavs are going to trade him. And right. And if it's not going so well, then I don't think the value is going to be there. Kevin's number is still pretty big. It's not like you're picking up a rotational wing at that number most of the time, So like I think even though you look at two big expirings and you go, maybe. I think like plus with all the sentimental connection with Kevin, plus 6 Man of the Year runner up. Very helpful and much more important at the 4 now that Lowry can't play any of those minutes.
Yeah, there's such a clear role and need. Right?
Yeah, so I don't see it.
And when we talk before about like, hey, the addition of Mitchell, what does it do to Evan Mobley? Like, I think we saw with Kevin Love, like not asking too much of guys can help preserve their careers and keep them effective and keep them healthy. And like Kev is in a role that I feel really confident in, right? Like I think he's in a perfect situation for him. As you said, there's such a clear spot for him on this roster that it's hard to see like making that asset player. Like I wouldn't write it off. Like the Cavs were really high on Lowry. They've talked about how much they valued Sexton, right? Like even though they were in contract negotiations, like he was clearly an important part of the culture of this team. So if an opportunity comes around, I wouldn't write it off. But realistically speaking, like the only situation I can really see it is, and especially factoring in the reality that the Cavs are probably going to have some cap space next offseason, and you want to maintain that flexibility and taking on money beyond this year, which I think is kind of the implication when you talk about trading expiring contracts and that having value. I think you only really do that and take on long-term money if it's someone that you say, hey, I would use the cap space on this player if they were available as a free agent. And I just don't think there's a lot of fits like that. Like maybe like right now, and this kind of ties into a follow-up question that Dimitri had, which is who are small forwards the Cavs can target in trades this year. This guy's an unrestricted free agent coming up this next offseason, but like honestly, Harrison Barnes to me is like the perfect player. Like he's the guy that you just kind of slot in, and maybe if there's an opportunity to go out there and get him early, I would do it. I would love to add him as a free agent next offseason and like someone in that mold. And there's other options too. We've talked about them, Kyle Kuzma and Jeremy Grant and a bunch of other small forwards that fit the role. But Harrison Barnes just seems absolutely perfect to me. So maybe if someone like that is available, but it's so hard to predict what names are going to hit the market. And I think the Cavs are going to try to maintain that flexibility because this is going to be the last time that they have cap space in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, you look at players who could be fits, Harrison Barnes, obviously is someone you've been enamored with for a minute. Gordon Hayward, someone I've been enamored with for a minute.
Yeah.
A guy like Bojan Bogdanovic obviously ain't coming here because if he was, probably would already happen. It stands to reason since he's in Utah. And then your other options are like, maybe the Clippers decide to stop hoarding every small forward in the league.
I don't think that's going to happen.
And I don't suspect that's going to happen anytime soon. Then you look at guys like, then you kind of just move out of guys that you expect to be able to trade for because their numbers are, funny enough, too small to get.
Yeah.
Guys like, Reggie Bullock, who's on a contender in the West anyway. So, like, I think, again, you look at the landscape, there just aren't that many options for trades, especially since the Cavs aren't likely to be giving up draft capital anytime soon in a deal. So it has to be a team that's looking to shed some salary probably, or really happens to like a couple of the Cavs' younger players that the Cavs are even willing to include. So I would...
Like even Jetty, like if we're talking about every like either non-guaranteed or expiring contract, like even at like his report salary figure, like it's tough to find a match that works there, and
especially since you don't often go you don't go archetype for archetype in this league very often. Like it's like the players they're trading are
really smart
hypothetically would be wings. Young wings, and who would they be looking to pick up? A young wing. Like, how often does that happen? So, I mean, I don't know about you, man. In terms of, like, they might make a fringe deal at some point this year. The chances of them trading for someone that is in the top, like, 7 of their rotation, or I'd say top 7 of their rotation this year, I'd put it less than 10%.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just hard to envision that kind of scenario coming along. And I think there's going to be real value. Like, it makes more sense when you are trying to collect assets and you're trying to get the guy and you're trying to maintain flexibility. Now it's about supplementing those 4, right? And seeing, hey, does Isaac Okoro step up and become that 5th? Does Karis LeVert turn into the perfect 6th man that makes sense to keep around long term? Like, there's real possibility in that. Like, Kevin Love, we know that he works in this role and is likely going to continue working in this role, right? So we're really talking about, especially if Okoro steps up and solidifies his spot as the team's starting small forward, what you're really talking about is the backup small forward position, which I don't think takes a lot to go out and get, right? Like, maybe you use the mid-level exception next offseason, and that's really it, right? We're getting to the point where, depending on the internal growth that they get, like, there's not a lot of pieces missing from this team, which is part of why I'm so excited about it. Like,
roster's
I like the
about
internal
done.
candidates.
Roster's about done unless they learn that some of the pieces don't work, like which it happens all the time.
Constantly,
but like, you look at the top 7, and if you include Rubio coming back healthy, 8. Like, most teams do not have their top 8 guys like set in stone the way the Cavs do right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, maybe there's a situation like if Ricky comes back fully healthy and looks great, maybe he comes back a little sooner than later. Maybe you want to do right by Howell Neto and get him to a situation where he can play more. Who knows? But I think we've also seen over the last couple of years that I don't think I want to be counting my chickens before they've hatched when it comes to the point guard position, because we've been left thin a few too many times over the years here.
You're telling me, pal. My goodness. It'll be interesting. I think one thing that we're not going to talk about on this pod, but we should probably start talking about soon, is that last roster spot, because all of a sudden it's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one. And having either a non-guaranteed contract in there or keeping it open might make sense if you are moving on from one of these guys, right? Like, when you're talking about these larger salary players, I don't think that would necessarily be the intention of keeping it open if they did. And I think there's certainly names that we could discuss. Again, Locked On Cavs had a discussion about the 15th roster spot. So if you want to get your fill of that subject before we get to it, you can go check them out there. I'll love to support our buddies. But yeah, I do think that it's an interesting conversation, but it's also one, like I said, like, with the roster already being as full as it is, it's probably going to be a tough sell. And I think that's one of those spots where you maybe take a flyer on a guy that's going to play with the charge and more of a developmental project versus someone that's actually going to project to be in the rotation.
Luke Travers season. Just kidding. He's not coming.
And for that reason, it's really hard to come up with names there, right? Because we're going to default to names we've heard and established players, whereas it might be someone in the G League that we just have no familiarity with.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
And someone that could pan out and become the next Lamar Stevens or Dean Wade.
Can't wait to find out, my friend. Take us home.
I'll take us home. That sounds about right. Carter, thank you again so much for covering me with that Zoom read. I completely forgot about that. And a big thanks to our listeners as well. Everyone watching live on YouTube. You can like, subscribe, click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, you can leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.